Hi everyone, I'm Amy. Welcome to my channel, Neurotic Mom Bakes. You are in for a real treat today because I am making the most delicious twist on a chocolate chip cookie. We are making caramel pretzel chocolate chip cookies and they are so good, especially if you love like that salted caramel flavor. This is adapted from my niece, Bountiful Brunette on Instagram, so I wanna make sure she gets credit. First thing we're gonna do is I'm going to measure out 1 1/4 cups of brown sugar. It can be light or dark. The cool thing about making chocolate chip cookies is there are so many variables that you can try to achieve like a different taste or texture. For example, this calls for 2 cups of sugar total, 1 1/4 cups of brown sugar and 3/4 of a cup of white sugar. But I tried making it with 1 1/2 cups of brown sugar and 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. And that's gonna give you more of a darker kind of caramely flavor. Or you could do half and half. You could do 1 cup brown and 1 cup granulated. And it will just be a little bit lighter. So you can kind of play around with that. I've done a lot of research on baking soda versus baking powder, what they do, how they make a cookie look and taste. Oh, that's why I have a hole in my, in my brown sugar bag. I was wondering why I was making such a mess. There's a hole. Brown sugar is just messy anyway. So just depending on your taste, you can kind of play around with those ratios. Another thing you can do is you can, I like to do 1/2 cup unsalted and 1/2 cup salted. If you like it saltier, go with the salted. If you don't like salt so much, then go with the unsalted. Now I haven't tried it with this recipe, but you can do brown butter instead of just the cold butter, and that will change it. There's just so many different ways you can kind of play around with the recipe. But today I'm gonna stick mostly with Bountiful Brunette's recipe, but I'm tweaking the butter. I'm doing 1/2 salted and 1/2 unsalted. Okay, 1 1/4 cups of brown sugar, 3/4 of a cup of granulated sugar, and then I'm going to cut my butter into chunks. It just helps it incorporate a lot better and faster. Go ahead and throw a few in and start my mixer. I like using cold butter straight from the fridge. I think it just helps the chocolate chip cookie keep its shape a little bit more. It doesn't spread so much. And I'm just gonna mix this until it gets all incorporated, nice and creamy, light and fluffy. Ooh, you know what? While that's mixing, I'm gonna go ahead and start unwrapping my caramels. Caramel, caramel. I did a big survey on my Instagram, and people pronounce it different depending on where they live, mostly. I've always said caramel. I've always just said caramel, but more people say caramel, at least in my survey, than caramel. So anyway, back to caramels. I'm using just the Werther's original chewy caramels, but any caramel will work. There's those Kraft ones that are wrapped, that are square, wrapped in the clear wrapping. You can use those. Ooh, okay, that's looking good. Okay, I'm just gonna crack 2 eggs and I'm just gonna add them 1 at a time. Okay, perfect. I'm just gonna scrape down my bowl to make sure everything is off of the bottom. It looks pretty good though. Yeah, that's nice and mixed well. Okay, now for the dry ingredients. I am going to move this. Don't forget the proper way to measure flour. Always kind of sift it a little bit with a spoon, fluff it, I guess, and then lift the flour into the measuring cup. Otherwise, if you scoop with the measuring cup, you're going to get way too much flour and you're going to have a dry, hard cookie. And just level it off. Anyway, we're putting 2 1/2 cups of all-purpose flour in here. But if you're not measuring with a measuring cup, that's going to be 300 grams. That's easier to measure out. Okay, another thing I experimented with my previous batch that I made, I did the different ratios of the sugars, is I experimented with the baking soda and the baking powder. Now the recipe from Bountiful Brunette calls for 2 teaspoons of baking soda, which I'm going to use here, And I'm just gonna show you the difference between the cookies I made earlier and the cookies today. The ones I made earlier, I did 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda and 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. Just a little bit of info on that. Baking soda generally makes the cookies spread a little bit more, and baking powder, which already has a little bit of baking soda in it, plus other ingredients, gives you more of a rise, more puffy, more cake-like. So if you went with strictly baking powder, you're gonna have a cake-like, not chewy cookie, which I don't think is very good. Strictly baking soda is going to be more chewy, it's gonna spread a little bit more. And a mixture of both, you're going to have a combination of both. We're gonna try it with just the baking soda today and see how it compares to the ones I made earlier. We are using 2 teaspoons baking soda and 1 teaspoon of salt. All right, I'm just going to barely mix this together. You don't want to over mix the dry ingredients in. So it's barely going to come together, and I'm going to stop right there. See that? There's still a lot of dry ingredients. We're going to stop right there because at this point I want to add my pretzels and my chocolate chips. I've got these little, like the traditional, pretzel twists, and I'm going to put a bunch in a bag because I'm going to crush them up and then measure out 1 cup of the crushed pretzels. Whoops. That ought to be enough. And then I'm going to save some whole ones to put on top. Here, I think that's good. You don't want it super fine. You want some pieces of pretzel in there. I'm just gonna measure out. There's 1/2. There's another 1/2. And I like to use a full, what is this, 11.5 ounce package or 2 cups of, I just like milk chocolate chips. I know lots of people like dark or a combination of both. I just really like milk chocolate chips in my cookies. And I'm going to put the entire package in. Now I'll continue mixing until it's just barely incorporated. I'll stop right there, and I'm just gonna finish by hand with a large spoon. Yeah, I'm just kind of getting all those dry ingredients off the bottom by hand so I don't overmix it. Okay, I'm going to set this aside for a second, clean up all my mess, and continue unwrapping my caramels. Caramel, do you say caramel apple? Caramel popcorn? I think that sounds weird. You say caramel popcorn. I don't know. What's your vote, Morgan?
I say caramel.
Yeah, it's a Utah thing. I swear it's a Utah thing. Okay, no point in washing my hands off because I'm gonna be handling the dough now. Now, if you want, it's just kind of easier. Because these caramels are in like long pieces, you can cut them in half. That's how I did it this morning. I just got scissors. Much easier to cut. Because we're going to be putting these inside our cookies. Actually, I'm going to show you a couple different variations that I tried. I've been experimenting with these cookies a lot. They're so good. And I wanted to get them just right. Okay, that's good for now. Okay, now, another variation. There's more. Different baking sheets will cook differently. Let me just show you. So here we have like the light, the gray jelly roll pan. And then this is the darker, I don't even know exactly what that is, but it's the darker, thinner baking tray. And I actually prefer this one for cookies. I like the caramelization it gives. It cooks a little faster. It's just a little bit different. So you can experiment with that also. Okay, move this stuff out of the way. Now I'm going to get a piece of dough. I'm going to show you a few different ways you can do this. And just, I don't know, inch and a half, inch and a quarter. I'm going to kind of roll them. Okay. Now, I tried this 2 different ways. I tried getting a half a caramel and putting it in the dough and covering the dough up. So that's a half a caramel. Then I tried putting an entire caramel, so 2 of these pieces if you want more caramel in there. And you might have to get just a little bit more dough just to make sure it's covered mostly. And then I tried just placing the caramel on top. This one, I'm gonna use 2 pieces, and this one I'm gonna use 1. Then I'm going to get my pretzels, and I'm going to press an entire pretzel right down on the top of the cookie. And I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees. They will go in there for about 9 to 11 minutes until the outsides are quite brown and they look finished in the center. I've got to wash my hands before I put that in. And in we go. Oh, I only did 6 here, but you could fit 8 or 9 on the tray. They do spread a little bit, so I don't like my cookies to touch. Plus, I'm gonna show you a really cool trick after to get your cookies perfectly round, so I want space to do that. So I just have 6 on here. Okay, I just barely pulled these out of the oven and I wanted to show you this trick. So I have a bowl. You can use a large round cookie cutter as well, but see how they're quite misshapen? That just is going to happen with the caramel in there and the pretzels and all that. But I want them to be a little bit more round, so I'm gonna put the bowl all the way over. I'm just gonna swirl it around and lift it off, and it's a round cookie. Isn't that the coolest thing? I learned this hack, and it changed my chocolate chip cookie life. Get those perfectly, oopsie, round cookies. Got a little bit of caramel on there. And you can do this with any cookie. Sugar cookies, my sugar cookies, they hold their shape. And same with my gingerbread cookies, but any of the other cookies, if you want the really round shape, this will work. Now with the caramel there, it's still spreading a little. It's just so soft. So you can go over them again if you want. Don't those look so nice? I like the shape of them. It's so satisfying to do. That's so much fun. Get that caramel off of there. So I'm just gonna kind of lift this up and show you. I'm gonna let them cool, and then we're going to do a comparison to the cookies I made this morning. Okay, here we have our cooled cookies. These are the ones I made previously. I'm just gonna show you, there's just a slight difference. First of all, I can't really tell a difference with when I added a little bit of baking powder to this batch. I don't think I added enough. It usually needs to be like 50-50 for it to make much of a difference, and I had, majority was the baking soda. So that really didn't change much. However, this one did have more of the brown sugar. So you can tell this is a little bit darker than these, just because you have more caramelization in the cookie. And then remember, we did it 3 ways. This is the version where we put the caramel right on top. And I thought it would spread and run all over, but it didn't. It stayed put. So that's probably the easiest way, just stick the caramel on top. This one, let me get the comparison. This one, we wrapped an entire caramel inside, and I'll open that up, but you can see it kind of oozed out a little on the top there, which I think looks nice. And then this one had the least amount of caramel. We just got a half a piece of caramel and wrapped it in there. I like more caramel. I would maybe even wrap 1 full caramel inside and then maybe put a half on top. But that's just me. I love caramel. So these are the side-by-side comparisons. These are just a little bit darker, you can see. They spread pretty much the same. I actually feel like these went slightly flatter. I'm not, just slightly. So I'm thinking the 2 teaspoons of baking soda is my preference for that. And like I said, I like the more caramel in there. So, but you can play around and do it however you wish. If you try it a different way, let's say you do 50-50 with the sugar, or you try variations with the caramel or the butter, just let me know how it turns out. I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments. And if you want to see more recipes like this one, please subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you next time.